Hello, my name is George from George's Computers, and today I'll be teaching you how to build a computer and PC building simulator. Technically, this could be applied in real life's building computers, but um, but this isn't quite the right type since I don't have any computer parts, and I'm too lazy, and I don't want to have to rebuild mine because I don't want to, and I will be doing a more in-depth description of how computer parts are, how they work, how to pick them out, and stuff, and just describe them overall. But this will just be like a light toe dip into kind of light description of it. So for first of all, you want to pick out your motherboard, and you can either go with AMD or Intel. Intel is faster, costs a little bit more, but if you want higher speeds, go with them. AMD is more budget friendly, more cores, more threads, so that basically means it's better for workloads unless you're getting a high-end Intel CPU. But so we wanna pick out uh, any motherboard works, but in real life, budget, features, and all that matter, because everyone's got a different budget, opinion, what they want to do. And after this, we'll have to install the CPU. In real life, you'd have to put in standoffs unless your computer case already has standoffs. And then you'd want to put in your IO shield, screw in that to the correct standoffs. Now we want to put in the CPU, and I'm going with the AMD Ryzen 5 6-core 3600. 6 cores. Uh, um, it's the second one to the third, because there's third, 5, 7, and 9, and then there's of course there's a Threadripper. And after this and this also depends on your cooler, but for this we'll want to have some memory. You can have your lowest amount that is good enough is also there's DDR2, well DDR1, DDR2, DDR3, and DDR4. Right now DDR4 is the latest type of RAM to be out, and the fastest and the highest in the most options for it. But we're gonna want to go with 16 gigs of DDR4. And the clock and the frequency is depending on your motherboard and CPU. Um, but and then also you could either, if you really wanted to, put in one stick of RAM right now, which would be the cheapest to do, and then upgrade it in the future. But the only downside of that is you're not running in dual channel, so you're not maximizing your full performance. So if you're buying a kit, there'll be timings. The lower the timings, the slower the speed. Higher timings is higher speeds. But also your motherboard will cap at a certain speed, unless you enable XMP, which is extreme memory profiling. Uh, and there's even more to factor in about stable frequencies and stuff. So for our cooler, we would probably want to go with a Be Quiet. Or, I mean, the stock coolers are good and all, but if you want to spend a little bit more, and this is dependent on I can't think of the name, the speed of the fan of spinning, but that also depends on and how good of heat pipes and heat transfer. Now after installing that, we're going to be wanting to install the power supply. The power supply basically is what it sounds like. It delivers power to your parts so they can function. And if you want to cheapen out on your computer, please, just please don't cheapen out the power supply, because because if it doesn't, it pretty much, if it fails and if it doesn't have all those protections, your computer is pretty much toast, and you don't want that. Uh, so yeah, never cheapen out on the power supply, and make sure, like, let's say your computer's like taking up like 400 watts. I would recommend getting like a 650 watt, just because that's a safe area of distance. Then you could also possibly upgrade it depending on what you're upgrading to, and what you're upgrading and what you're upgrading to, and what's a stable amount. But now we're gonna install the SSD. You can either go with M.2 or an SSD. They're both faster than a hard drive. Hard drives are uh, usually slower. They can be, depending on if your it because if your SSD doesn't have cache or whatever, it can be slower than a hard drive. Excuse me. And depending on what you plan on doing, and if you want a big capacity of like a big game library for Steam, I'd recommend for a hard drive or SSD, I would recommend getting a terabyte at the very least. But now, if you want to have like a terabyte of hard drive space, yeah, I would do that. And then you can always buy like a Western Digital 240 gig as like a boot drive, so your OS will be on that, and it can be faster than the hard drive. And then you can put all your games, or put your games that have low that are not as big in capacity of things. But you could clog up your system and slow it down if you're so you want to be careful on what speeds and stuff you're going with, or with capacities, because if you put in too much, it's gonna gunk it up and your system's gonna slow down, and that causes problems in the long run. So now we're gonna install the graphics card. And the graphics card really depends on what kind of CPU you're using, case size and stuff, because you want to of course you want to have the right case space, or it obviously won't work. And then, because if you don't, like, let's say you have like a if you know what if you know what like an Intel i3 is, so a lower end Intel CPU, and let's say you get like a 2080 Ti, one of the highest end graphics card on the market right now until the 3000 series for Nvidia releases. Because if that's too big of a difference and they're not won't work enough, it'll be a bottleneck, because the CPU will be doing all the work, and then most of the graphics card won't even be utilized, and that's vice versa as well. Now you also want to install case fans. Always make sure on the size. There's 120 mil, 140 mil, and I think I can't think of the other one. Yeah, I think that's it. Because you want your airflow, so you can keep, keeping everything cool with that nice airflow. And I'll also do a video on a good airflow. And then it also depends on like this case. It's got a top fan spot, and there's a lot of stuff to factor in where you're putting it. There's lots of stuff to factor in. And now that we're done pretty much installing all the components, now we're going to wire them all up, so they will work, obviously, because you won't get no power connections if they're not powered up by your power supply. And then once you have all of your components wired up to the power supply in their selected areas, like motherboard, SATA ports, and then you always want to connect your case, because you don't want to forget about that, or your front like buttons and stuff won't work because they're not there. once everything's wired up, you're going to have to put in all your panels, and of course in real life you're going to have to cable manage if you want to. I highly recommend it because it's going to help you in the long run. And then once you have that in, you don't want to cable manage until like, let's say like a month after it, because it's going to be a pain. Like, let's say you have a faulty hard drive and you cable managed, or like, let's say you have that's easy to swap out. But now let's say you have like a dead motherboard and you cable manage, you're going to have to do all on that unwiring, take out everything, uh have all the boxes and stuff for it. Then you're gonna have to get in, if your things are within the warranty date, get the entire process going, send it back, get a new one. It's a very long process. And then you're also gonna want to keep your computer clean with air, canned air, because if you're gonna use like something, you're gonna build static electricity, and static electricity hurts your computer because it will either damage or kill your parts. And now once you have your OS onto your USB drive, or Linux or Windows, not quite sure about Mac, because Linux and Windows are the best things to pretty much go with, because Mac is not for gaming really, it's more workstation area. And you're usually gonna have to buy expensive Mac computer from Apple, which and once you have you want your smallest gig capacity on your drive you want is probably 8. I'd recommend getting a little bit bigger in case. And besides, they're usually not that big of a price difference either way. Then once you do that, I didn't do it in this, but you'll want to go into the BIOS, make sure everything's showing up, and then you'll want to have to go through the process of installing the Windows and everything, which can take a while depending on your internet speed. But that's going to be all for this video. I hope this helps you out. I'm going to do a more in-depth a guide, because this wasn't that good of one. It was just kind of the basic and fundamentals. I'll do some more videos about this. I mean, I hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe for future content. Yeah. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.